Please welcome NLC Second Vice President and Mayor of Tacoma, Washington, Victoria Woodard's.
Hello, NLC. Welcome to our second general session for CCC 2021. It's a pleasure to be with all of you again. I'm Victoria Woodard's, Mayor of Tacoma, Washington, and I am honored to serve as the second Vice President of the National League of Cities. Did you have a great time yesterday? I know I did. As we focus on the 3 R's, respond, recover, and rebuild, there is so much information to soak in. One critical topic we have all been faced with during the past year has been how we must rethink and re-envision public safety, particularly in the wake of the murder of George Floyd at the hands of local law enforcement. NLC has a long history of work in race, equity, and criminal justice issues, and we are ready to support local leaders in this work. It is my pleasure to introduce my colleague and NLC immediate past president, Councilmember Joe Buscaino, who will lead us in an important, frank conversation about the role we all play in these critical issues.
Hello, my name is Joe Buscaino, Los Angeles City Council President Pro Tem and immediate past president of NLC. I'm so excited to be here today to discuss what it means to reimagine public safety with 2 forward-looking local leaders. As we all know, 2020 was a year unlike any other, one that forced us to look at our cities in ways that we have not in the past. One thing was clear: public safety systems required a national reckoning, in particular as it related to the need to look at how these systems impact our Black, brown, and Indigenous residents, and those most vulnerable in our communities, like the homeless, mentally ill, and otherwise compromised. Cities are truly taking the lead in rethinking and re-envisioning their local approaches to safety and what it means for their community to feel truly safe. At National League of Cities, those local efforts did not go unnoticed, nor did the need to bring all of these centers within the organization together to support members as they venture toward these new approaches. Prior and current work at NLC connected to public safety included an active federal advocacy committee on public safety and crime prevention, considerable work around juvenile justice, young adult justice, and jail reduction by the YEF Institute, related projects on mental health, substance misuse, homelessness, and the opioid crisis, the work of our Race, Equity, and Leadership, our REAL team with cities to address systemic racism and trauma, and reports on 21st century policing and city-state collaboration in policing. With this historical work as a guide, and after several events where the team spoke to members and highlighted city leadership in this space, the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force was launched on January 27th with the support from the MacArthur Foundation. Made up of 25 mayors and council members, this group is diverse and representative. There are small cities, mid-sized cities, and large cities represented, and diversity in both thought and experience. And what they share is a desire to do better and to do more to promote safety for their residents. Over the next several months, the task force will come together around recommendations for municipalities based on new and promising examples of local public safety transformation. The group recognizes that this is not one size fits all, so we'll work toward a menu that includes alternative and differential response mechanisms, violence prevention, reduction in interruption, accountability in policing, public safety budgeting, and jail reduction strategies. But the real center and focus of this work is community engagement and racial equity. So today I'm lucky to be joined by the task force co-chairs. First, I welcome Mayor Raz Baraka from Newark, New Jersey. Mayor Baraka is receiving national recognition for his ability to really turn around his local public safety system. After decades of police community conflict and with an ongoing federal consent decree, in Newark has seen a turnaround under his leadership. Some high-level accomplishments are a police force that did not fire a weapon at all in 2020, comprehensive de-escalation training for law enforcement officers, a reallocation of money from the police budget to create a holistic Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery, a UCLA evaluation reporting the effectiveness of community street team in reducing crime using community-led efforts, and work toward a more comprehensive and powerful police oversight board. I'm also joined by Mayor David Holt of Oklahoma City. While Mayor Holt admittedly is just getting started in this work, like many local leaders, his city represents one of that is beginning to re-envision public safety that best represents his community. Recently, Mayor Holt has announced a law enforcement policy task force that will examine local police policy, enforce de-escalation, and explore stronger resident engagement and civilian review options. He has also acknowledged after officer-involved shootings that the answers aren't simple and that he and his team look toward a menu of options to improve outcomes. Thank you both for being here and for being leaders in this space and for co-chairing the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. I so look forward to this conversation. And I want to start by asking each of you, why did you decide to take on the challenge of leading this task force? Mayor
I'll defer to seniority. Mayor Baraka.
Sure. I think it's a very important issue. And obviously, we're doing work around it here in Newark. And I think it's an issue that is pervasive throughout the country, and many cities are going to have to grapple with it. And I think to be able to be a part of this task force to create opportunities to do good work, to change our communities and change the trajectory of policing in the community is a wonderful thing to be a part of. And I think it's going to be historic as well.
Thank you, Mayor Holt.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to say no to you or Clarence. I mean, that's the real answer. But this is a very critical issue, not just in my community, but around the country. And I think it starts from a common ground that we can always provide any service that our residents rely upon better than we did before. And public safety is no different. And as you said in your opening comments, every community is going to come out of this with a different outcome that fits the needs of our residents. And that's why I think it's so important that this task force, really provide a menu of options. It's not going to be a prescription that's going to fit for every city because we all come at this from a different perspective. But I recognize that there are thousands of cities and towns in our country, and they can't all afford, nor should they hire, these high dollar consultants to come up with their plans. We can help bridge that gap for a lot of communities around the country with what this task force produces. I mean, those who participate in the task force will obviously leave with a lot of enrichment and a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, but we're also going to produce the final product that will be useful to the entire membership of NLC. And that's something I'm proud to be a part of and glad that we could help facilitate that useful work product for the members of the National League of Cities.
Appreciate both responses. As we've known over the course of these last 7 months, 8 months or so, we've seen a lot of our resident community-based organizations come to us to demand that we reimagine public safety. So what do you see as the biggest challenge to reimagining public safety and municipal policy? Mayor Baraka?
Well, obviously, just the biggest, I think, obstacle is just the culture, and change itself is always difficult to get people to buy into, and there's so many contentious sides to this that we have to make sure that when we create these opportunities, that they kind of service all of the issues that we're talking about. So we have to do it in a way that helps to reduce crime and violence in the community. That's one. We have to do it in a way that it's constitutional in terms of making sure that people's rights are upheld, and putting sanctions and other things in place to make sure police officers and the community are satisfied with the responses that are happening when we do have incidents where we think police have broken the law or doing things that are not correct. So all this is a very difficult kind of meal to make. There's a lot of ingredients here. It's a lot of things that need to take place. So you have to be cautious, thoughtful, but at the same time have a sense of urgency.
Yes. Mayor Holt?
I think two fronts. One that Mayor Baraka directly touched upon, which is just that change is hard. And so you've got to be really communicative with all parties involved. And everybody agrees, I believe, in every city that you can always do a better job on public safety and whatever else is that people rely upon their cities for. And as long as you continue to keep the discussion on that common ground, you should be able to make change. But that's obviously the hardest part. And maybe a close second, if not a tie, is going to be money. I mean, isn't that always one of the greatest challenges? In our case, we believe that having an adequate number of police officers, and at least the number that we have today here in Oklahoma City, and we'd like to have more. Our voters actually approved an increase in our police officers a couple years ago. We believe that's integral to having good community policing. You've got to have enough officers on the streets so that they're not just running from 911 call to 911 call. And, most of the expenses related to law enforcement are personnel related. And so I think cost is going to be one challenge as we try to bring in, new offerings, new types of response to different kinds of calls, the kinds of innovative things that you hear people talk about, mental health teams, that sort of thing. Well, that costs money. And where's it going to come from if we also want to keep, a strong number of officers on the streets, building relationships and doing community policing? So that's going to be, I think, one of the greatest challenges, and not necessarily one that this task force can solve. Everybody's going to have to figure out how they find their own revenues on their own. But I think that's obviously one of the greatest challenges in this endeavor.
Let's talk about, if we can, the work of the task force, which I know has just begun. So I'll start with Mayor Holt. What can you say you've learned about reimagining public safety that you think our attendees here viewing should consider as they begin to tackle some of these issues in their respective communities and cities?
Well, as you said, it's just getting started. We've had one listening session, as you and I are talking now, and we've had one formal meeting of the task force. So, it's important to not get ahead of ourselves and to not short circuit that conversation. But, maybe the one takeaway is there's a lot of great ideas, and there's dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of laboratories of democracy across the United States right now trying a lot of different things. And even in the introductory press release for the task force, we went ahead and sort of laid out, 10 or 15 things that are already being tried that will surely be included in the menu of options that we present as a final product. So I think my first takeaway is simply there's a lot of great ideas. There's a lot of good people trying to collaboratively work together. And I think I'm just anxious to dig even deeper and hear more about that and pull it all together into the final report of this task force.
Mayor Baraka, thoughts on, we just began this task force. What do you think our attendees should consider as they begin to tackle some of these issues?
Well, I think the idea that they have to have a radical imagination, right? and take risk. The only way you can create things is if you imagine what they would be like. I mean, at some point, we have to be able to figure this out, and you're going to need some very smart and thoughtful people on this. I think the points that Mayor Holt raised are very real and concrete issues that we're going to have to come up against. And so you have to have people that are clear on this and are thoughtful enough and smart enough to kind of figure these things out, but also willing to take risks, like to be have their imagination be big enough to try things that are not normally used in these spaces. In order for us to reimagine police, the base of that is imagine, right? We have to have a huge and radical imagination.
Thank you for that. As far as reimagining public safety, I mean, it's not a big city issue, or is it? Is it a big city issue, or is it an issue that municipalities at all sizes need to work on to improve public safety?
Yeah, I think that it is an issue for everyone. Listen, if Newark has something that's working, people want to feel safe in Newark, but they also want to feel safe going out of Newark to other surrounding cities in the area, whether it's be safe from violence and crime or safe from, police officers that have taken their job a little too far. So it's important that all of us have affect the culture of what's happening around the country so that we begin to impact not just large cities, but, cities across the gamut here in the country.
Mayor Holt?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many communities had protests and other difficult conversations last summer, but it was more than just the 25 largest cities in the United States. It was hundreds of cities. So I think anyone who's got a police department, anyone who's got crime, anyone who's got the complexity of human interactions is going to need to look at these issues and do so quickly and take this as a moment to reevaluate what we do.
We're gathered here during our Congressional City Conference to uplift our voices on behalf of municipalities across the country. So let's talk quickly, and then we'll land this. The importance of the federal government partnership. How do you think the federal government should help municipalities reimagine public safety? Mayor Baraka, start with you.
I think Mayor Holt said it already. The first thing is resources. Obviously, we need resources in these communities to do this type of stuff, to get this done, to deal with this issue. Secondly, to kind of adopt and take seriously some of the ideas that come out of this task force, begin to create task forces of their own to figure out how to transfer some of these ideas into a national conversation, how to make these things a reality from a push from the White House. I think all of that is important. So we need the bully pulpit, the infrastructure, and the resources.
Mayor Holt.
I think that was well said. I have nothing to add.
Fantastic. So as we conclude our talk, and thank you again for your leadership in this space, well, I'm going to ask you to close by providing one thing that makes you hopeful about this task force and the work that we're all doing to reimagine public safety across the country.
Well, you've got at least one great co-chair here. You've got a great task force, and you've got the support of NLC, and you've also got some philanthropic benefactors. I mean, this is unlike anything even a large city could imagine being able to pull together. So, I mean, the resources being put into this are tremendous. So, no, I'm very excited at what I think we'll be able to produce and bring great value to the members of NLC. I mean, I don't think any stone will be left unturned. If you read this report at the end of this process, you're going to have at your fingertips every concept that is out there relative to public safety in 2021. So I think that's an incredible thing that we're able to offer the members of NLC.
I just want to, I'll echo the sentiments, Mayor Holt. I mean, he's absolutely correct. The number of people, the variety, the diversity of people that's on the task force is amazing. Very smart leaders in their communities doing great work. The NLC is right on top of it, put their foot in it in terms of the resources, infrastructure. I expect great things.
Fantastic. Thank you both for joining us. And as we know, as this country has been engulfed by protests and calls for local leaders to reimagine public safety, just know National League of Cities is working to lift up these efforts of local elected officials who are leading innovative approaches to reshaping the way public safety services respond to calls for help. And we have two amazing local leaders helping us guide us in this process with measurable outcomes. And I can't thank you both for saying yes and leading this task force. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Joe.
Be well.
We are now pleased to welcome Clarence Anthony, CEO and Executive Director of the National League of Cities.
Somebody said it couldn't be done, but he with a chuckle replied that maybe it couldn't, but he'd be one that wouldn't say so till he tried. So he just took off his coat and went to it. There were thousands to tell you that we could not get direct funding to local governments. There were thousands to prophesy failure. There were thousands to point out one by one the dangers that waited to assail us. But we just buckled in with a bit of a grin on our face and took off our coat and went to it and started to sing as we tackled the thing that they said we couldn't do, and we did it. Our city officials, our staff, our state league, y'all, we did it. We got a chance to get direct funding to every city, town, and village in America. In all my years with NLC, and as a former mayor, NLC president, and now as your CEO, I'm not sure we have ever had a more critical moment for this conference than now. Just weeks ago, we welcomed a new administration and Congress. It's been almost a year since our country shut down. We're still in the midst of a global pandemic. And for the last year, you've been fighting this pandemic on your own as city leaders. But finally, help is on the way. Let me take a moment to give you a real-time update on where we stand with COVID-19 relief. The Senate voted on an amended version of the COVID-19 relief package this past weekend, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. The package was expected to be passed as early as today in the House of Representatives, which includes $65 billion of direct funding to every city, town, and village in America. It includes transportation dollars, housing, and FEMA recovery funds. That is critical for our communities to become more stable. Let me take a moment to say this again. After nearly a year of relentless advocacy on your behalf, we have secured $65 billion of direct aid to every municipality in this country. Let me give you a sense of exactly how this happened. Last spring, NLC launched our Cities Are Essential campaign. We challenged the way we did business, activating our advocacy team, ramping up our communications, strengthening our research and data, activating our memberships to get results. We also joined with our powerful network of our state leagues who invested in this campaign, and together we leveraged the stories of our members, putting a face on this issue, using data and legislative intelligence to drive the campaign forward. In addition, we recruited more than 170 coalition partners to join the effort. Our message was heard widely, from media articles to letters to the editor, Hill briefings, and press conferences. The Cities Are Essential campaign highlighted the critical role that municipal governments were playing in keeping residents safe and fighting the coronavirus pandemic from the front lines every day. Unfortunately, aid to local governments was excluded from the relief package signed into law at the end of 2020. But NLC did not stop. We immediately began having conversations with the new Congress and administration. Up until this past weekend, we were on the phone directly with Senate offices advocating for the exact amount of aid we were seeking. And the final package included exactly what you asked for, what we asked for, that $65 billion. And so we are here. More than 300 days since we started this effort. We've come to the final day of this fight. And I'm so proud of NLC. This victory has been great for us to deliver for you, our members. And I'm proud of the partnership of my partners, the state league directors and the state leagues themselves, our corporate partners, and our coalition members. I'm proud of the NLC staff that I have worked with for years. They showed up, they poured their heart and soul into this effort. And more importantly, I'm so proud of all of you, the mayors, the council members in every city, town, and village all over America, our members. You did the work to uplift your own stories and be your own best advocate for your cities, towns, and villages. On that note, let me take a moment to shout out 4 of our members who have completed every advocacy action we have shared this past year. You know, if we were in a room together at CCC here in DC, I'd make them come up to the stage. So the next best option is to flash their pictures on the screen. First, Pembroke Pines, Florida, Mayor Jeffrey Jacobs. Washington, North Carolina, Councilmember William Pitt. Oakland Park, Florida, Commissioner Matthew Sparks. Cesar, Illinois, Mayor Jason Ashmore. They responded every time we asked for a call to action. Now, that is being a true advocate, not just for yourself, not just for your city, but for your citizens. Let me just say, though, our work is not over. COVID relief is just one of the 5 federal priorities we've outlined to the new Biden-Harris administration. As you've heard throughout this conference, in addition to COVID relief, we have outlined the importance of sustainable infrastructure, a skilled workforce, which is needed in America, ending housing instability and homelessness, and reducing gun violence. We've been laying an important foundation with the new administration and Congress. Immediately following the former certification of President-elect Biden, NLC prepared a 27-page transition memo for the incoming team. We also drafted 13 individual agency briefing documents highlighting priority areas for our members to each incoming agency leadership. And let me tell you also, that initial groundwork made a major difference in our relationship. Since Inauguration Day, we have had members have roundtables with Secretary Buttigieg, with Secretary Yellen, and dozens of other conversations with agencies across the administration. And the engagement in this conference itself by administration officials shows the partnership that is underway. We've been working actively to position NLC in front of the new Congress as well. NLC leadership testified before the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure and the House Committee on Financial Services within the last month. So what was our goal in doing all of this? The goal was to uplift our member stories and underscore the needs of municipalities as a result of the pandemic and the crumbling infrastructure that was occurring. So here's the bottom line. We've learned a lot this past year. The advocacy we do today can help secure the future of America's 19,000 municipalities for years to come. This conference that we're at, it's just 3 days. But the work we are putting in now, in these next few days and weeks and months to come, will lay the groundwork for what communities look like for generations. As we mark 1 year since the start of this pandemic, your leadership from the very beginning to now has shown just how local leaders lead. You lead from the front lines. You led with empathy as you responded to social uprisings in your cities following the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. And you led by keeping your economies afloat during an unprecedented economic downturn. So I'm going to take my moment and opportunity to say, thank you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us these last few days, for uplifting your voices, for your leadership during these challenging times, and for being your own best advocate. The National League of Cities is dedicated to ensuring your best interest is at the forefront of every federal policy, today and for decades to come. And know that NLC will always deliver for you, even when somebody say it can't be done. I want to take a moment to introduce you to our next guest. There's perhaps not one single lawmaker who has been more steadfast in their commitment to ensuring direct local aid to our communities. She understands you are all on the front lines of COVID response and recovery and has been a vocal ally. She's consistently championed the critical role of local government and how we play a role in the financial burdens in America that you've endured. In fact, her latest hashtag, Fund the Front Lines, was used just last week in building support for local aid, which I've now stolen and started using myself. And she will play a critical role in ensuring the American Rescue Plan Act gets across the finish line. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce the 52nd Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi. Welcome, Speaker Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Clarence. It is my honor to bring greetings to America's city leaders on behalf of the United States House of Representatives, and to do so as Speaker of the House. And I thank you, Clarence, for your kind words and for your leadership as Executive Director of NLC, for your lifelong leadership on behalf of America's cities and communities, bringing your great experience as champion of educational and economic opportunities during your 24 years as mayor of South Bay, Florida, and as the former president and now CEO and executive director of the National League of Cities, representing thousands of cities, towns, and villages from every corner of America. Before I get further into my remarks, I want to address some that you made and say that when you talk about gun violence as one of the priorities that you presented, gun violence prevention, one of the priorities to the administration and to us, that this week we will be voting on the that very legislation that calls for background checks, as well as closing the loophole, the South Carolina loophole, Mr. Clyburn's bill and Mr. Thompson's bill. We also last week, as you mentioned, George Floyd, we passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. So many of your priorities are our priorities as well, because you've made them known to us. So many of the priorities that you have presented to the administration and your testimony in Congress is very important, because there's so many needs and the prioritization of it is essential. And I thank you for that leadership. I also thank NLC President Kathy Nannis of Lexington, South Carolina. We talked about the South Carolina loophole, for her visionary leadership, particularly to advance youth civic engagement in our cities. Point of personal privilege for me, let me salute my mayor, San Francisco Mayor London Breed, who's been an inspiring, effective force for good during this time of pandemic and economic crisis. I had the privilege of having a town meeting with her, by phone with thousands of San Franciscans on Friday afternoon, actually, night here. But it was about a day of action for the Rescue Act. We had over 80 of them around the country, and I was pleased to have one with the mayor. I know there are many Californians in on our conversation now, and I bring greetings to them as well. You know, Clarence, tomorrow marks 1 year since I was honored to address city leaders at your 2020 conference. At that time, the coronavirus was accelerating, and House Democrats had passed our first response package. But little could we imagine the horror and heartbreak to come. Actually, our meeting then was the last meeting before the virus really took hold. Since then, nearly 29 million Americans have been affected, over 500,000 tragically dead, 18 million still on unemployment, and millions more unsure of how to put food on the table and keep roofs over their heads. For you, America's leaders, I know that this pain is personal. As you may know, as I've said before to you, as the sister and daughter of 2 mayors of Baltimore, I've seen firsthand there's no buffer between you and your communities, that unemployment statistics and infection rates are not numbers to you, but daily devastating realities of your neighbors. Understanding this staggering human toll, the National League of Cities has worked day in and day out to respond, rebuild, and recover. And now, under President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, 2 leaders who embrace the science and listen to our leaders on the front lines, the American people can know and be assured that help is on the way. Indeed, Saturday was a great day of progress and promise for the American people as the Senate passed the American Rescue Plan. The House we're in the process now. We're going to rules as we speak. We just got the paper from the Senate. It takes a couple of days to get processed. And within days, either tonight or tomorrow, we will pass it, and just a matter of days, it will be on President Biden's desk so that it can be enacted before unemployment benefits expire in under a week from now. The American Rescue Plan is a beacon of hope for America's families and struggling small businesses. It is a decisive action that is needed to save lives and livelihoods, putting vaccines in people's arms, money in their pockets, children safely back in school, and people back to work. The legislation is a strong step forward for our local, state, tribal, and territorial governments. It includes as you know, over $65 billion directly and exclusively for America's cities, no carve-outs for other entities. We're proud to ensure that cities of all sizes receive their own allocation. The 65, the way it is, it's 350. Part of it goes to the state. 130 go to the localities. Half of that, 65 billion, go directly and exclusively to America's citizens. We're proud to ensure that cities of all sizes receive their own allocation, from the largest metropolitan areas to the smallest towns. And we have ensured greater eligibility and, magic word, flexibility, so that you can funds that were that you need the way that you know best, including addressing revenue loss because of the shut-in and the health and economic impacts of the pandemic. Overall, this coronavirus-centric legislation puts nearly $1 trillion, separate from the money I talked about going to the cities and state, puts nearly $1 trillion in the pockets of the American people. All money that will go directly into your communities, including through direct payments, that check, expanded unemployment insurance, child tax credits, and renter and homeowner assistance. On behalf of the House, I thank you for using your voice to lift up the legislation, including through 300 virtual meetings you're holding on the Hill this week. Your advocacy has helped ensure that the American people know exactly how the American Rescue Plan benefits them, which is why over 75% of the public supports this bill. Republicans, Democrats, Independents. We're so pleased with that. Across the country, it is bipartisan, even though we didn't get any Republican vote in the Senate. I'm hoping to get some today. Or maybe it's tomorrow when the bill comes to the floor, depending on how long it takes in the Rules Committee. The livelihoods of our cities, towns, and villages depend on this legislation, which is not just a rescue package, but a recovery, a national investment to build back a better economy. It cuts child poverty in half, lifts 12 million Americans out of poverty, in addition, including children, and creates 7 million new jobs. Build back better. That's what President Biden calls it, and we call it Build Back Better for the people. For the people is our overarching theme. Build back better for the people. We must take additional bold action to build an economy that works for all Americans, to do so in a way that acknowledges the twin realities of income disparity and the climate crisis. And that's why the Democratic House is committed to working with you to move America forward, including with landmark infrastructure bill to create millions of good paying jobs, reimagine and revitalize our transportation infrastructure, expand broadband to every corner of the country, take our nation into clean energy economy for the future, and you all have been on the lead on that, strengthen our resilience against the climate crisis, and honor the federal government's responsibility to local government. At the same time, together, as we build back better, we also must advance justice, opportunity, and progress in every zip code. You mentioned earlier about the human resources that we need to build back better, which is why the House, making our community safer, which is why the House is proud to have passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act last week, as I mentioned. And this week, we will pass common sense gun violence prevention legislation. Making our communities fairer, soon we'll pass legislation securing workers' rights, the PRO Act, and equal pay for equal work. Making our communities more just. This is why we passed the Equality Act to end LGBTQ discrimination. And we'll soon pass, this will be next week, the Dream and Promise Act to ensure that our immigrant communities can continue to strengthen and enrich our country. Nearly 60 years ago, in his State of the Union address, President John F. Kennedy rightly observed, "A strong America depends on its cities." Now, every single day, we see that statement could not be more true. In the face of pandemic and economic crisis, you are on the front lines, leading the fight to save lives and livelihood, following the science. So in addition to everything else that I talked about the money that goes directly to you to address your responsibilities, in addition to that, in this bill, there's a huge amount of about $160 billion for education, which will come into your community, for transportation, for issues, as I mentioned earlier, that relate to rent and home ownership, and also about feeding the hungry. Millions of people in America, I say, are food insecure. My kids say, "Mom, don't say food insecure." They're hungry. They're hungry. Well, the list goes on, whether it's FEMA and other allocations of resources. I'm sure you'll see the full array. But it is all about meeting the needs of the American people, and you are in the front line of doing that. So in the weeks and months ahead, we'll continue to rely on you as our vanguard, marching forward and making progress for all people as the engines of dynamism and drivers of prosperity in America. In our mission to build back better, Congress and the country need your continued committed leadership. We need you as an intellectual resource, as well as a delivery of services to people and organizing for a better future. Thank you all for your courage to move America forward. And thank you for giving me the honor once again to address you as the lead. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Join us in welcoming our next speaker, former EPA Administrator, now serving as the White House National Climate Advisor, Gina McCarthy.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I have to say that it's always daunting and absolutely never easy to follow Speaker Pelosi. But I do have to say, on the other hand, where she leads, I'm going to follow. So it's exciting to hear her enthusiasm and to always see that every year she serves, she is for the people. And I think that's why I'm always so excited to come back to NLC and to all of the folks who have dedicated so much of their life to working for people, whether it's as a city or a local government leader. And I will tell you that I spent my first 11 years in public service, followed by many decades more, working at the local level. And it was the best job I ever had, as well as, frankly, the most difficult one, because you can't avoid looking at the challenges you're facing and having to explain to people what you're doing for them every single day. And so it's a fulfilling work, but also challenging. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about what we see as both our challenges and opportunities at the federal level right now to deal with some of the most compelling challenges that we are facing right now. And so one of them is clearly the climate crisis, which I know that many of you are seeing play out on the ground day in and day out, with threats that are really gripping our communities and, frankly, communities across the globe. And so President Biden, when he was running for office, realized that he had to come out with a strong climate action plan. But he also had to realize how he recognized that we're facing a number of crises today, and we need to have those crises front and center in terms of how we're going to strategize moving forward. And this is the exciting part about the dots he's connected, and about the intersectionality between the public health challenge of our pandemic, the challenge of racism and equity that we need to keep front and center of all of the efforts that we are undertaking, and the challenge of regrowing our economy, making it stable again, which means those nearly 10 million people who are out of work today need to have jobs, not in the future, but they need to have jobs tomorrow. So as I was tasked to take on this wonderful role of looking at how we could advance our opportunities to address the climate challenge, the president made it very clear to me, as well as to everybody in the public, that when he hears the issue of climate change, what he thinks about is jobs, jobs, jobs. He thinks about not just any job, but good jobs, and how we create a whole of government approach to investing in our clean energy future in a way that is not going to leave any community or any worker behind. And of course, this is a very challenging opportunity, but it is in fact an opportunity. It's a moment for this president, President Biden, to stop thinking about our addressing climate change as an ask to sacrifice, as much as delivering benefits and new opportunities across our country, in every state, in every city, in every local community. Because he knows that cities and local communities are where all of the action starts. You know it, and I know it. I've worked at the local level, the state level, and the federal level, and I know that the most creative and the most compelling programs and projects and processes and laws begin actually at the local level where innovation thrives. And it always happens that it keeps inching up into states and then into the federal government, where finally the rest of us think we've come up with a brilliant idea, when really it's just an understanding of what works and what's already been proven. So I want to remind you of a couple of things. Number one, you're not just the engine of innovation, but you have been incredibly meaningful participants in our climate efforts as we move forward. And we are going to continue to make sure that cities and local communities are part of the process that the federal government is going to understand and communicate and put into action on how we address this climate crisis with our eyes wide open to who benefits. Are we getting money to the environmental justice communities, the communities that have been left behind? Are we getting them first in line for those benefits? Are we thinking about how we use this as a stimulus for job growth and how we can work together to advance this country and build its leadership once again on climate across the globe? And I want to remind you that back in 2015, when we were in Paris, many of you were there. In fact, the National League of Cities led the largest delegation of city officials to the Paris Climate Convention, and you were some of the loudest and most fun voices that were actually demanding climate action, and it led to really the adoption of a historic Paris Agreement. And then when we had the prior administration come in and decide that climate was something they weren't going to actually address, but instead deny, you stood up. And you stood up and said, listen, we know what the science says. We understand the challenge of climate. And you said that we are all in. And so we watched you hold the fort on so many of the progressive actions that we had taken already and keep progress moving forward in a way that made sense to your communities, made sense to your cities, and helped to benefit them while we were continuing to have the U.S. provide leadership internationally that we could all celebrate moving forward. And now, 5 years after the Paris Agreement, we had been absent for 4, and guess what? We are now back in. If you remember, President Biden committed during his campaign that we were rejoining Paris, and we know now that we have already joined, and we are back in action in every sector of our economy, thinking about the way forward to have the commitment to the international community we need, and thinking about how we benefit in this moment of hope and opportunity. Yes, I know I'm saying hope and opportunity, but that's because we finally have a package that the speaker just outlined, that is the American Rescue Plan, that is really going to move us forward to address the pandemic and provide us the resources we need to move forward as a country. And now the fun begins, which is how do we initiate a whole of government approach to begin to address climate change and to think of it as a moment of recovery, a moment of economic growth, a moment of creating an economy that is safe and sustainable, one that's going to reach every community across this country using every tool of the U.S. government to make our climate strategy work for every community and every worker. And this is a large task indeed, but one that nobody is going to shy away from. President Biden had one of the most aggressive climate plans that we have ever seen. He actually is calling for clean energy by 2035. How can he be sure that's going to happen? Because it's been happening. Because clean energy is where the job growth was before the pandemic hit. And we know it has continued at a steady pace to go farther and faster because it's cost effective, because it can help people in every community to afford to live a better life and afford home ownership over the long term. And we need to support those goals, because this is what we mean about rebuilding the middle class. This is what we mean about growing jobs. Every time we ask for a building to be more efficient, or we ask for a building to look at opportunities for clean energy, we are talking about job growth, job growth, job growth. And we are excited to be working already with the utility sector to design a strategy moving forward. So now that we have moved past and are going to implement the rescue plan, we are talking about building back better. We are talking about recovery. And I am optimistic that we are going to make this work in a way that's going to benefit every community. We are talking about opportunities, not just to move forward on housing or utilities. We're talking about infrastructure jobs, investments in America again. That's not just roads and bridges, but it's investment on how we're going to empower America to compete in a global economy. Grab the supply chains that we have let dwindle and move offshore, and grab those back again so that we can meet the challenge of job growth while at the same time addressing the issues of climate change. How? With auto manufacturing jobs that are growing the vehicles of the future. We are talking about cleaner vehicles that are going to make your air pollution challenges less onerous for the health of your community. We are talking about bringing parts and materials and battery storage so that they're manufactured in the United States of America once again. We're talking about investments in transit. We're talking about power sector jobs that are based on a clean energy economy. We're talking about building jobs, not just plumbers, but electricians, real on-the-ground human beings that have an ability to join a union to ensure that they are going to have stable and well-paid jobs well into the future. We are not going to accept one or two check marks. We want it all, which is why the whole of government approach is bringing together every agency, asking them what they can do for the American public, not just to address climate, but to advance job growth, to take a look at who's benefiting. President Biden has committed that 40% of his investments in clean energy are going to benefit the communities left behind, the brown, black communities, the poor communities, the indigenous populations that have been left behind for far too long. We are talking about lasting, equitable jobs. Nothing else should suffice. And so what can we do as a whole of government? Well, we have a domestic climate office that's all about bringing these agencies together, looking at their policies, their practices, what they're investing in. We're talking about new investment opportunities with a recovery package. We are talking about an opportunity to empower human beings that have been left behind and to build the economy of the future that we need. We're talking about manufacturing jobs in the middle of the country. We're talking about re-engaging with our farmers and our agriculture community to make sure that we're providing healthy food to those who need it while we're protecting our water quality and our air. We are talking about vehicle fleets that have plenty of charging stations. Now, if you're worried that electric vehicles may not be the future, I'd have you talk to any of the car companies, because they'll tell you that it has to be, because every country in the world is now investing in energy infrastructure. They're investing in electric vehicles. We need to capture those markets, which is why President Biden is going to be constructing 500,000 charging stations to make sure that these vehicles are going to be suitable for every customer in the United States. And we're going to be looking at opportunities to lower the cost of those vehicles so that they're affordable to everyone. We're looking at long haul trucks where there's all kinds of opportunities for different types of energy resources that will lower, again, that air pollution and lower the cost of those vehicles and lower the upkeep, the necessary kind of maintenance that you do over and over. So we are excited about the opportunities today. We are all in terms of moving this forward. And let me wrap up, because I know that there are always challenges that we have to face together. But I know that local communities and cities are struggling today. This is not a time of sacrifice. It's a time for hope. The best four-letter word in the dictionary. It's hope. And we are going to bring that to every city and every local community in every state in the United States of America. We're going to tell you that we understand that the sacrifice needs to stop, and we are going to provide you an opportunity to move forward together. President Biden has a vision for an energy future that is clear. He has made strong commitments to achieve net zero by 2050, not because he thinks it's going to be difficult, but he knows that if we work together as the complete United States of America, then we will be able to achieve this, and as a result, strengthen our ability as a country to work together again to the benefit of all people. And again, nobody should have to be left behind. All of us should have to prosper. So again, I know I may sound like an eternal optimist, but I've worked in government now for almost 40 years. And it's because of my commitment to public service that I have a strong commitment to President Biden. He is a labor president. He is a man whose values he wears on his sleeve. He wants to make sure that as we buy products and as we design programs and as we make investments, that it's all about the people. So I'm excited to be working with you again. I know we'll have plenty of time to talk, but rest assured that we know the value that local communities and cities provide to this country. And we are going to invest in you to create a vision for your communities and your cities that is going to meet the needs of your communities. Thank you very much.
Please welcome back to the stage, Clarence Anthony.
Good afternoon, everyone. What a conference we've had the last 3 days. Can you believe we are almost at the end? Before we close today's general session, we have one more conversation, and a critical one at that. The value of public-private partnerships related to entrepreneurship, small businesses, and addressing financial deserts. I want to invite to the virtual stage Franz Poshaw. Hey, Franz, how are you?